Are we still celebrating? Are we still okay? Y'all might not have been able to hear me just now. Um, so starting out, I hope everybody is having a great sleep. It is a great day. The sun is shining. Most of us listening, I'm sure, had a great weekend. So for those of y'all listening from North Texas, if you're listening or watching on YouTube, feel free to share in the chat how you're doing. And to my Cowboys fans, how are y'all doing? Are y'all still celebrating? Are y'all still talking about all the things that y'all liked about the defense from this Sunday? Or are y'all distracted by like Max Crosby rumors and whatnot? um, anyway, just to rewind a bit, this is Bitches Love Sports on NTX Radio, and I'm your host, Jazz Monet. And so I have a few rules, or a few asks, I should say, before we get started. So if you're new here, make sure that you hit the like button. It's free, and it helps us out. As if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, whatever platform you're listening on, if there's a way to like it, thumbs up, give it a heart, go ahead and help us out. Also, if you are on the YouTube side, or actually, once again, wherever you're watching from, feel free to share your thoughts and your takes in the chat. Like, shows are better when they're conversational. So if you have any thoughts from this weekend, especially if they're Cowboys related, go ahead and share them in the chat. I'm curious what everybody thinks about everything that we saw this Sunday on both sides of the ball, honestly. I feel like people are talking about the defense a lot because that's where the biggest area of growth was. But there's some great things to say about the offense as well. It's a really good week to be a Cowboys fan. It's a really good week. And three, if you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you know when I drop something new. And then one more ask that I'm going to make this one time is if everybody could just take a deep breath with me real quick, and we're just going to manifest an episode with no audio or visual issues. We're going to have a fun episode today. There's a lot to talk about still in the same amount of time. So, all right. So for anyone who might be watching or listening who is not a Cowboys fan, the reason why I shouted out the Cowboys fans first was because the Dallas Cowboys absolutely dominated the Washington Commanders this weekend. So it was a game that ended with the Cowboys getting a 40 burger. Honestly, I thought they might make it to 50. I think they slowed down a little bit towards the end. As you can do whenever you have that big of a lead. No reason to stress yourself out, especially not in week 7. But the final score was 44-22. And not only did they get the win, not only did they double the score of their opponents, but they gave fans what they've been asking for a long time, for several weeks now. And that is the defense playing more man coverage. It's not like the defense was asking, or it's not like fans were asking for all man coverage or, never play zone. They were just saying, hey, it just seems like with the personnel that you have on the field, if you were to go about things this way, you might get a different result. If you were to blitz a little bit more, you might get a different result. And after that loss to Carolina, fans were definitely looking for a different result. And if we pay attention to what players and coaches were saying in their press conferences and interviews this week, everybody in that building was looking for a vastly different result. And that is exactly what they got. But if you've listened to me long enough, you already know I'm not really the type to declare them good or bad at week 7 or ever. I don't like to drop hot take style, I like to look at what actually happened in a game and what it might mean going forward, because I feel like one win, especially with a team that's been as up and down the season as the Dallas Cowboys, one win doesn't answer the questions. It tells us what they might be capable of in certain situations, but sometimes a win can actually create new ones. And so I feel like whether or not you're asking those questions already says what type of fan you are. And if you know me, you know I'm not judging either way. I think everybody should fan how they want to fan. Be the type of fan that you want to be. Like, life is short. Sports is a pastime. So do you, by all means. But I believe there's a certain caliber of person who says, like, yo, this is a good win. This was fun. However, it leaves us with some questions. Like, there's some questions about some of it is just that so much of what we saw is new. And so we need to figure out, or is it something that's sustainable? And some of it is that learning. So I'm going to dig into a few of those real quick. So the first topic that stood out to me when it came to this win and this great Cowboys win that points to a lot of great things moving forward is the context. And I know that that's something that several people have been talking about. I've seen it on socials where people are kind of using the context of the game to downplay the situation. So I just want to start off by saying that's not what I'm doing. The same way I was after they beat the Jets, where I was like, yo, a win is a win. You need a certain number of wins in order to make it into the postseason, which at this point, that's pretty much what this team is going to be judged on, fair or not. Do they make it to the postseason? Can they make a deep run in the postseason, right? And so you can only play who's on your schedule, and whatever their situation happens to be, that is what you have to deal with when you play them. So if you play a Jets team that seems to not have it all together on the offensive side of the ball, or in this case, you play a Commanders team that doesn't have it together on the offensive side of the ball for different reasons, that's who's on the field. All you can do is your best and get the win, right? But that being said, while everybody's talking about how great the defense looked and their improvement in terms of getting to the quarterback, speeding up his clock, getting pressures, so on and so forth, you do have to consider the fact that they were missing 3 significant receivers. I think they were missing some other people too, but that alone will change how a quarterback reacts. It will change his timing. It will change the trust that he does have in his targets. So I would say that's pretty significant. Once again, not significant enough to take away from the team or anything the defense did, but it is the kind of thing that makes you say, okay, that was cool. Now do it again on the road. And do it against targets that are actually starting caliber. And do it against a quarterback who actually has a connection with his targets and faith in his targets. And an offense that's actually a little bit more prepared for what they're dealing with. But, I mean, on the flip side, you also have to account for the fact that it just seems like Jaden hasn't been doing well against man in general. And so when Shadi said in his press conference, they asked him about like what spurred the change in deciding to play so much man as compared to what they've done in the past. And he's like, oh, well, that's simple. This is a team that we wanted to play man against. It's not that simple. It was not that simple. You don't go from playing zone 90-something% of the time to all of a sudden you're playing man like 40-something% of the time. You don't make that drastic of a change because, oh, well, in week 7, this is the team that we decided to do this against. That's not how that happens. And so I was irritated by that answer, I'm not going to lie. But then I thought about it and I'm like, well, had he said anything else, it would have led to more questions and questions that he probably didn't want to answer. So honestly, I don't really blame him. So there's that. But so whether or not Jaden had all of his targets, the fact is it was smart to play man as much as they did against him specifically, especially with it being that the goal is to get the win at the end of the day. Once again, whoever is on your schedule, that's who you got to play. Whatever circumstances they're dealing with, that's what you have to deal with. So I'm pretty sure if they could have proven what they proved against a higher caliber team or a team with less injuries, sure, they would have done it, because who doesn't like to shut your haters up? I mean, why not? But that's what they were dealing with. So I feel like the context is important. I feel like it's important going forward. I feel like it's something that we just need to think about when it comes to the narrative of the team. Because I think there are some people who are going to look at this win, they're going to look at what the defense did and be like, okay, well, we should only go up from here. Now that, a lot of people are looking at it as, okay, now that they know what they're doing, this is what they should look like every week. And I just don't think that's necessarily the case. All right. The second thing that is on my list here is, where did it go? Sorry. The second thing is the running back question. So this is something that popped up as I was kind of more so looking at stats than anything. I will admit, I have a lot more film to watch on this game. And I'm going to tell you why in a second, because it's related to something that happened and a rabbit hole that I went down while I was watching film on the other side of the ball. So what I'm about to tell you is mostly based on stats, but I have no problem with being told that I'm wrong. So if you are a film watcher and you've seen something that contradicts with what I'm about to say, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'd love to look for it myself. But yeah, the running back question, running back depth. I'm sure we're all very excited about what Javonte Williams has put on the field. Like, if you listen to what Shadi has said about how the offense is able to operate, a lot of it is owed to Javonte Williams. I feel like I have hair or something on my face. Anyway, a lot of it is owed to Javonte Williams. From the way that they're able to operate at the end of the first half with, getting down the field and getting that score so quick. And I personally feel like just having that balance in the offense of having a threatening run game along with like two really threatening receiving targets, it helps the offense as a whole perform more efficiently because it's not like any particular defense can put all their eggs in one basket. They can't even put it in two baskets. You got to put your eggs in minimum of three baskets. And even then, the Cowboys have like two more baskets after the first three. You know what I'm saying? But depth at the running back position is something that could come more into play as the season goes along. So I'm going to just read off a few numbers here. So when we look at Javonte Williams and Jaden Blue. Javonte got the bulk of the carries, 19 attempts for 116 yards. That puts him at 6.1 yards per carry. And Blue was at 7 attempts for 29 yards and 4.1 yards per carry. So that's a 2-yard difference. That right there is going to give you a big drop off if there's ever a situation where you have to count on Blue. And that's not me, saying anything about injury, although I'm going to knock on wood anyway. It's not necessarily injury. Like, your main running back might just need some more time later in the season, time for rest. You might just want to take a little bit of the load off of him. Maybe. I don't know. He might be one of those running backs who's completely fine. But typically, at some point in the season, you do end up in a situation where you have to rely on somebody else in the running back room. And when that happens, I'm pretty sure you don't want to deal with a 2-yard per carry drop off. Now, I'm the type of person, I'm like, okay, let me look at these numbers a few different ways, because they say numbers don't lie, but they can be manipulated. Whether or not numbers lie is all about how you present them and what you're using them for. Numbers don't lie. People do. And sometimes it's not that the numbers are lying. It's sometimes just that people mistake what the numbers mean for something else. So I told you what their averages were, but I like to subtract their longest run from the total and then divide that by the remaining runs in order to get what their average is without that long one. Because a lot of times running backs will pop off like a really long one and it can like really bump up the average. And so it kind of did a little bit for both of these running backs. So without their longest run, which for Javonte Williams, his longest was 33 yards. So if you remove that attempt from the equation, he averaged 4.6 yards per carry. But you still get a drop off from him to Blue, because without Blue's longest run, which was 9 yards, you get 3.3 yards per carry. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say, yes, I know it's a small sample size with Blue. So this could be something that changes if he has more running attempts or just as time goes on and he gets more used to the offense. Because although I didn't watch a ton of film, what I did see a little bit was just like maybe a mismatch in timing with him. I would have to watch it again to know if it was like his hesitation or something about the way that he was running. But it just seemed like there was just a mismatch there, right? And so things like that are something that could work itself out when a running back gets more attempts or as they get more used to running behind certain blockers or a certain offensive line, right? So this is something that could very well be a non-issue in a couple of weeks. It could very well be a non-issue this week. But like I said, this isn't me saying if the team is good or bad or if any particular player is good or bad. This is me just saying, hey, I saw the game. I'm excited about the game. Good for them. Woo, go team. But these are some questions that popped into my mind even though they got this big win over the weekend. So the last thing that I like to look at with running backs is how often are they getting runs that are 3 yards or less, because those are the ones that we really don't want. We really don't want those runs that are 3 yards or less. Like, they can come in handy, especially if it's like 4-1. We only need you to get a yard, and that's what they get, and they go down with the ball. Cool, right? But for the most part, we want those runs to be 3 yards or more, right? And so when I looked at Blue's runs from this past game, 57% of his runs were 3 yards or less. So that was, or actually, no, I think I might have gotten that. Let me double check that. Yeah, he had 7 carries. 4 of them were 3 yards or less. So 57%, right? as compared to Javonte Williams, who he only had 32% of his runs that were 3 yards or less. So once again, that's a big drop off from one running back to another, to where if you, for whatever reason, had to rely on Blue in a game, you would experience a serious drop off in your run game, which could have a ripple effect across the entire offense. So just a question that popped into my mind, like, okay, is running back depth something that we should be concerned about, or is it going to work itself out? So something and I'm sure others will be watching this weekend, next weekend, so on and so forth. So the last thing that I want to talk about, and this may even carry over into the second segment, is what exactly is going on with the defense? So while I'm excited about them playing man more, I'm excited about them blitzing more, all of that looked great, and it worked well on Sunday. I find myself asking the same question that I asked last week, which is this still an attack front defense? And I only ask that question because, like, it's not like, oh, they were just playing man more often, right? It's like, if you were to sit me down in front of a computer and it was like black and white and I couldn't see any logos, and you were to just like show me, let's say, dots on the screen for where they lined up, and be like, what defense is this? Whose defense is this? I wouldn't have guessed Dallas Cowboys from some of these formations. And it's not because I just started watching film or identifying formations. It's because some of that shit was so different. Eberflus has been doing a lot of the same shit week in and week out. And it was just getting worse. But a lot of it looked the same, especially when it came to the defensive front. Every now and then you would see a little bit of a change up, but like not really. But now I'm seeing him have someone like actually in the nose tackle position, like head up with the center. And I was just like, wait a minute. And the reason why I even noticed that was because I noticed that he was using Maris Luafau in a different way. And so when I was looking at where Maris Luafau was and who was next to him and where the other linebackers were and who he was next to, and then that got me to actually looking at the line, I'm just like, wait a second. Having someone in that particular alignment, we haven't seen that. I don't want to say it's never happened. Like, in my mind, I feel like it's never happened, but I could just be forgetting. But if it did happen, it happened so infrequently that I literally can't recall when it ever happened. And it's so infrequently that I saw it, and it literally caught my attention that there was somebody lined up at the nose tackle spot, like head up with the center. That's something that we don't typically see. So that was just like really interesting. The usage of Maris in sort of that edge rusher position was also really interesting, especially because he did it pretty much every time Maris was out there. Like in the past, I think we've seen like Maris do that maybe 1 or 2 times in a game, but for the most part, he's out there as a third linebacker and doing that whole open field coverage thing that he's not really that great at. So on one hand, I was like, dang, Maris snaps are going down again, which, as the unofficial president of the Maris Luafau fan club, kind of made me a little bit sad. But on the other hand, I'm like, wait, it seems like they're kind of experimenting with his usage there, It seems like they might be trying something new with how they plan to have him contribute to the defense, which I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see it. Let's see how it goes. But the reason why I said I was going to come back to this, the reason why I want to watch a lot more film is because, like, I'm going to be honest with y'all. A lot of content creators, they are in a position where they can do this full time, and I love that for them. I am not. I had to work yesterday. The fact that I got one article written yesterday was like a miracle. It almost didn't happen. So I had to work yesterday. I had to work this morning. And so I haven't had as much time to dig into the film as it would take for me to like really come to some solid conclusions and opinions about what I saw. But that's partially why, because I went down a rabbit hole of starting to look at like every defensive snap and who was lined up where and what the formation was. And so, like I said a few minutes ago, it had me asking the same question that I was asking last week of, is this still an attack front defense? But I feel like I'm asking it for a different reason, but I still have the same response, which is, it doesn't really fucking matter, honestly. The real question is, can it work? Can it work consistently? And last week I asked that question out of frustration because I was like, I don't think this can work. And if this is supposed to be an attack front defense, it's not being executed very well. Like that's like, and not even from like a player execution standpoint, just from like I was even asking questions about the linebackers then of just like when it comes to an attack front, there are certain things that you expect the linebackers to do with relative frequency that they were simply not doing. So I was just like, okay, what exactly is supposed to be happening? And this week, it's really more of like, okay, these formations look totally different. The person you have lined up against the center, the fact that you have a person lined up against the center and what you're having that person do is also quite different. And then the way that you're using some of the linebackers is different. And maybe Sanborn being out just, opened up opportunities for them to just explore with who they are, with the people they are putting on the field. I don't know. But that's something that I want to take more time and look at. So, like I always say, keep your notifications on because we might talk about that on Thursday. Um, but anyway, yeah. So I feel like when it comes to these three things, so we talked about the context of the win. All right. Technically, that applies to every single game. Every single game is different. There's every single game you can look at something and say like, okay, well, yeah, but every team's not gonna have a quarterback who looks lost. Every team's not gonna have three receivers out with injury. Every week there's gonna be something different, right? So we can kind of throw that one out the window. It's good to think about, what the Cowboys will look like on the road, or like in the past, it's been a popular question to be like, well, they don't do well on grass. I don't know why people dig that deep. You don't even have to dig that deep to analyze this team. But stuff like that, I'm just like, we'll throw it out the window. We'll worry about it later. The running back question, I feel like will sort itself out. So I'm gonna be watching a little bit more closely, just so that's something that we can kind of talk about if it does become an issue as the season goes along. But I have a feeling that as Blue gets more snaps and he gets more used to being relied upon, those numbers will change. So I'm gonna keep note of them, but it's not something that I'm really truly worried about. It's just something that I'm kind of curious about. A lot of people were looking forward to seeing what Blue would do once he was on the field. And so it's like he's got a spotlight on him right now. He just does. If it weren't for that anticipation, he would be just another new player on the team and people not expecting much, So I have a feeling that'll sort itself out. I'm not worried. I'm just watching. But this defense question, like I'm really curious because I'm just like, okay, is it more than just we're gonna blitz more often? Is it more than we're gonna run man? Like, did we actually decide to like change the types of formations that we're using? Are we actually looking at players on the field and being like, we need to use you in a whole different way? And so this is like the beginning of a whole new defense. So I'm curious if what they did because they were going up against the Commanders and the Commanders' offense, and they felt like this would work specifically for the Commanders' offense, or if this is something that they feel like is better for the team moving forward. Because there's some people who are going to be coming back to the defense. Like, what happens once Jack Sanborn is out of concussion protocol? Do they put him back in there? Is that going to change what these formations look like? What happens when Trayvon Diggs comes back? You know what I'm saying? So it'll be interesting to see what happens as a lot of these people come back. And I mean, the same thing could be asked on the offensive side of the ball, really. But I feel like we're going to see improvement there. Cooper Beebe coming back, like Brock Hoffman. I love him as a person. He's a great asset to the team. I hear he has a great personality. Cool. But yeah, I really want to see Cooper Beebe back in that center position. Who else is coming back? Overshone's gonna come back to the defense at some point in the season. They just opened up his 21-day practice window. And if they, at the end of 21 days, decide not to put him on the active roster, then they've got to leave him on IR for the rest of the season. So I feel like at the end of 21 days, I don't know how many snaps he's going to be getting or how long it'll be before he's like really ready to start and see some consistent game action. But in 21 days, well, technically the window starts tomorrow. So in about 22 days, Overshone's going to be back on the active roster. Revel's coming back, So there's going to be some changes regardless. But yeah, just the drastic changes in what we saw in that defense. Once again, it's not just playing man more. It's changes in the formations, changes in the usage of the players. The players themselves talked about changes in communication. That to me says it was more than just Eberflus. And there's been a lot of talk that we'll get into in the second half about who was saying what in the building that may or may not have led to those changes on defense. So we'll talk about that a little bit after we come back from the break. So thanks for those of you who are being active in the chat. Good to see you. And here's what I want y'all to do. We're going to go to break in a second and tell me if there's anything that I didn't mention that caught y'all's attention from the game, or just share your opinions on the defense and what you saw in the chat. And we'll address it when we come back, as well as get into some fun stories in the Read and React. So we're going to take a couple of minutes and pay some bills. Then we'll come back and then we'll finish this up. Once again, this is Bitches Love Sports. I'm Jazz Monet. I'll be right back. Okay, I guess I'm not going anywhere. There is normally a break there. There's not right now. If it does come on, then we'll just pause. But looks like no break today. So anyway, let's continue in that case. JV, good to see you in the chat. Let me go ahead and shout out the other people in the chat since we're not on a break. Ta the Black Paladin, I like that name, says, hey, how you doing? Miss Jazz, peace and blessings to you. I'm doing well. Thank you. It's been a good Tuesday. JV is driving, of course. Be safe, JV. And Dakota says, hello, you are beautiful. I'm back. Well, welcome back, Dakota. Good to see you in the chat. Thank you. All right. So, no break. So, give me just 1 second to pull up a couple things because normally I take that commercial break. Kelvin says, hey, sorry I'm late, y'all. It's all good, Kelvin. So I'll do a quick recap for Kelvin and anyone else who might have just popped in. So Kelvin, essentially what I spent the first segment talking about is just a few questions that I still had about the team, even though they had a phenomenal win against the Washington Commanders on Sunday. I was like, the Cowboys have been pretty up and down this season. So there are a few things that, are still kind of in the back of my mind that I'm paying attention to as we go forward, especially just like going on the road and playing against teams under different circumstances. So one, the context of the game. I'm not saying that to take anything away from the Dallas Cowboys. I still feel like it's a great win. You can only play who's on your schedule, and you can only play them when you're scheduled to play them and under whatever circumstances they happen to be facing whenever you play them. So still a great win. But while we're celebrating all the great stuff that we saw from the Cowboys defense, we do have to consider that the Commanders were without 3 of their receivers, and that does make a difference in what the offense does and how smoothly it performs, right? So that was one thing. And then I talked about running back depth and whether or not that might come into play at some point. So I brought up the fact that you essentially get like a big drop off from Williams to Blue when it comes to their production. And that's not just yards per carry. I removed their longest run from their sets, and there's still a big drop off in yards per carry. And then with Blue, 57% of his runs were 3 yards or less. Whereas with Williams, that number was only 32%. And so when it comes to needing runs that are 3 yards or more, you don't really want to deal with that big of a drop off if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to rely on one running back as opposed to another. That kind of drop off can impact how the entire offense operates. But small sample size. Blue only got 7 carries. So I'm like, if he has to handle the ball more, if he gets more opportunities to take runs as time goes on and he just gets more used to his role on the offense, I feel like that number's probably going to change. So I'm watching it, but I'm not really worried about it. And then I was talking about the defense, which is actually going to carry over into this segment. I was talking about the defense and basically some of the changes that we saw, because everybody's talking about the change from playing damn near almost zone. I saw a number that said that this season they were playing 88% zone, but I feel like that must have taken week 7 into account, because before that, I saw a number that said they were playing like 90-something% zone. So to go from 90-something% zone to, I think, depending on what source you look at, it's like 45 to 48% man coverage is what they were doing on Sunday. That's huge. That's fucking huge. But as I was watching the film, I also noticed players being lined up in different ways. Marist was at edge almost every time he was out there, whether it was like a typical edge position or a standing edge where he was like lined up a little bit further back. That's typically where he was, attacking from outside the tackles, close to the line. Um, and then you had this situation where it's like, I was like, I don't recall ever seeing someone lined up in that true nose tackle position, just like head up with the center like that this entire season. I don't recall Eberflus ever doing that. So I'm just like, is that like an idea he had that he just didn't roll out? Was that somebody else's implementation? I'm just like, what the hell? So I'm looking at the stats, but I'm also looking at the formations and the usage of certain players. And I'm just like, what does this mean for the defense going forward? And out of those three things, the questions about the defense were the biggest, they were the biggest blinking lights to me. So let me see what y'all are saying in the chat. Kelvin said, I think that's trying. Been trying to tell everyone I don't think blue is it. That's fair. That's fair. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. I won't say that you're necessarily wrong because I would need to watch him more in the regular season. I don't like to put too much weight on what we see in preseason, whether it's good or bad, just because the conditions are so different. So you might not be wrong, but I just think we need more time. Give it more time. I'll feel more confident, like giving an actual opinion on him after a couple more weeks. Right now, I'm just like, I've got my eye on this. This is something I don't necessarily like, and I need to see it improve. But I'm not going to be like, oh, we should get rid of him. This is a bad choice. Not my style. And then you said that they're running more 3-4. Yes, that was really interesting. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So I'm like, okay, did they just do that because it was the Commanders? Or is this something that they feel that need to do more running forward? Give me a second. We didn't get a commercial break, and I need a sip of water. Hold on. All right. If y'all ever watch me live, like during the week at night, y'all know how I get when I'm talking for a long time. Normally I can get my water on commercial breaks here, but like y'all have seen me on those late night lives when my throat starts to get dry. It's a mess. I need to set a timer for myself, a water timer. So anyway, if y'all have any more Cowboys thoughts, put them in the chat. But real quick, I want to get into some read and react, and then we'll come back to this conversation. But first, before we get to the read and react, a couple of news updates, I guess you could call them, especially for the people who are listening from North Texas. So, one, this is especially for the North Texas people. This morning, I went to the Firefighter Challenge World Championship that is currently being held in Farmers Branch, Texas. And it was dope. I didn't know what to expect. I did not know what to expect. But like the name of my show is Bitches Love Sports, and me watching these competitions was proof that like, yeah, I really do love every sport. Every single sport. Um because I feel like there's almost nothing that's competitive in that way that I won't try to learn about and get into and just be like, oh yeah, I could develop some takes on this. But yeah, the Firefighter Challenge World Championships are being held in Farmers Branch, Texas right now. And there's literally people from all over the world competing. I met a guy from France. There's a guy from South Africa who did really well today. I saw some people from Poland, from Estonia, from New Zealand. It's pretty dope out there, and all ages too. I think the youngest age group that I watched today was 18 to 24, and the oldest was 55 to 59. And it's essentially like the series of, or at least today it was. I don't know if it's the same every day, but today it was like this thing where they had to go up like 4 flights of stairs, and they had to pull this thing up on a rope, then they had to run back down the stairs, and then they had to hit this thing with a hammer, and then they had to go run, like grab a hose, run the other way with the hose. They're doing all this with all their gear on, by the way. Gear on, mask on. So they got to run back the other way with the hose, spray this thing. Then they have to pick up this 175-pound dummy that they then have to carry to safety. And like, by the time they do all this, like, they are so worn out. A couple of them didn't finish, which was a little bit concerning because I'm like, "Yo, you can't just leave the dummy there on the course. Like, you need to save him." Like, I'm just like, "What happens if this is a real situation?" You know? But I guess in those situations, they would have, like, help. But no, like, they would get to the finish line, and they had, like, these cushions that they would just, like, collapse onto, and there was this whole crew of people there to help, like, take their mask off so they can breathe and take their gear off because apparently that shit is really heavy. And yeah, it was phenomenal. So that's going on. I believe entry is still free. So if you are north of Dallas and want to go check that out, just Google it. You'll find all the information. It's pretty dope and a fun watch. Also, NBA season is underway, the regular season. Preseason has been going on for a while. So the Mavericks season starts tomorrow night, and they will be at home against the Spurs. I don't think I'm going to be covering the Mavericks the same way that I did the Wings. So I don't know if y'all should expect that type of thing from me. But I am going to try to do a better job of keeping up with the Mavericks this season than I did last season. Didn't do a lot of coverage on them preseason. So sue me. I hope one day I can make this like my full-time job and I can do all the things. But for right now, I have to divvy up my time. And I just haven't had much to devote to the Mavericks. So their season starts tomorrow, and we'll see how they do. I have no predictions. I'm excited about what we'll see from them. Like, especially hearing that Wembanyama gained like 20 pounds, and a lot of that being muscle in the off season. I'm just like, yo, what does this dude look like now? Like, what kind of offense is he going to be playing? So I'm very excited to see how the game turns out. But no predictions, not from me. All right. And with that being said, let's get into the read and react. So we're going to do the read and react, and then we're going to cover a quote from Shadi, and then we'll be out. So today's read and react brings us back to the WNBA. It's a really small update. And honestly, the only reason this is an update at all is because Adam Silver did an interview. He's making it sound like there's new news, but there's really not new news. So here's what The Athletic had to say. It says, Adam Silver says WNBA players are going to get a big increase in pay among CBA negotiations. And so apparently he went on the Today Show on NBC and was asked, they get 9% of total revenue compared to roughly 50% of the revenue of NBA players. Should they, being WNBA players, be getting a larger share of revenue in the WNBA? The Athletic says Silver was quick to clarify, yes, I think share isn't the right way to look at it. So he shouldn't have said yes. He should have said no. But what he said was, yes, I think share isn't the right way to look at it because there's so much more revenue in the NBA. You should look at it in absolute numbers in terms of what they're making. They're going to get a big increase in this cycle of collective bargaining, and they deserve it. So looking at it in absolute numbers is what they're already doing. And that's what the players have a problem with, because a lot of the players have acknowledged that, yes, they've been given a number. They've been given an absolute number that is higher than what they're getting paid now. But in terms of the actual share of the revenue, their share would actually be going down if they were to agree to this new collective bargaining agreement. So I think for the players, they're looking at this in two ways. They're like, one, we want closer to 50%, like what the men get. Two, why would we take a smaller share? Why would we do that? At least give us the same share, which would still be more money than what you're already offering. And I don't know if any of them are actually saying, at least give us the same share. I'm just saying, like, from my perspective, that would make sense to at least give them the same share that they're getting, even if that, like, does mean they're getting more money than what they're already getting. So it really feels like Adam Silver and Kathy Engelbert are going to try to strong arm this situation. So the NBA owns, which means they also control 42% of the WNBA. So that's a tricky situation that the WNBA players find themselves in, which is that they have like some really powerful people working against them. And obviously, because of the way these negotiations have gone, yes, the WNBA is making more money, but it seems like there were some people in terms of who needs to get a share of that quote unquote more money. You know what I'm saying? And whoever those people were, whether it's the NBA thinking they need to be paid back for all the years that they kept the WNBA afloat, because yes, it is true. the WNBA was operating at a deficit for several years, and the NBA subsidized them for several years. And I don't know what the arrangement was there, but it could be that in one way or another, even though it was a tax write-off at the time, the NBA is like, nah, we want our fair share first because this league would have gone under if it weren't for us. So yes, give the players a raise, but you know, as Adam Silver said, he said himself, essentially that there's not enough revenue to give them 50%. Okay? So I'm just like, look, players, you have stated your case. Whoever is ahead of you in line to get their share, Adam Silver is making sure that that happens. Kathy Engelbert is making sure that that happens. So I don't think there's any way around those two people because it doesn't seem like, contrary to reports, Kathy Engelbert is going anywhere. And so you either got to just do the lockout thing and see what happens, or take what it seems like they're not budging on offering you. So this is going to be interesting. Technically, the CBA runs out on October 31st, but there's been a lot of talk about an extension. But when it comes to the reports of Kathy Engelbert leaving, supposedly there's no confirmation that she's actually going to leave. But there was an article released on ESPN. This is the second part of Read and React, where several WNBA executives, so these are front office of the teams, several of them have said that they would like to see different leadership in the WNBA. There was even one person who acknowledged that they didn't like what Nafisa Collier did, but they still didn't think that Kathy Engelbert should be replaced or fired. Let me see if I can find that real quick. I can't find the exact quote, but the name of this particular article is WNBA CBA negotiations, biggest issues, lockout potential, and more. And this is on ESPN.com. It's a WNBA story, so it's under that section. And yeah, there were several coaches and WNBA execs who basically were like, yeah, even before Nafisa Collier said what she said, we already felt like Kathy Engelbert should be replaced. And then there were a couple of people who were like, yo, I don't like that she made private conversations public. I felt like that was inappropriate. And at least one person said that they felt like even though they did want Kathy Engelbert to be replaced, the fact that Nafisa Collier did what she did made them not want to do that now. And I think it's because the situation has just gotten messy because of that. The situation has just gotten really messy. And I think there's a lot of people who would just like rather not deal with the drama that might ensue if a player makes that kind of statement, does that kind of like surprise press conference and exposes private conversations, and then the league ends up acting in response to that. I think a lot of people just don't like the precedent that would set and just the mess and drama that would ensue. Because in case y'all haven't noticed, when it comes to coverage of the WNBA, these major networks, they love mess. They love mess more than the actual games. These people covered the myth of Caitlin Clark being hated by black women in the WNBA. They covered that shit more than they covered the WNBA playoffs. They love mess. They love drama. They love rumors. And I think a lot of people who are actually in the WNBA are just kind of sick of it. So that's our Read and React for today. Now, we'll do a quick watch and react to this particular quote from Brian Schottenheimer, because I feel like he kind of summarized what some people are thinking about the Dallas Cowboys in terms of what this win over the Commanders meant and what it could potentially mean for the team moving forward. So let me go ahead and pull this up, and we'll watch this clip and talk about it on the other side.
It was a very good game. I said last night, and I'll say it again, there were things we need to clean up. I think offensively, our pass protection was not the standard. You know, Dak took too many hits last night for different reasons and different breakdowns and all of that. Defensively, we have to make people kick field goals in the red zone. You have to do that. I mean, the league is a high-scoring league right now, and we have to do that. And it starts with us stopping the run in the red zone and then getting off the field on third down. And really on special teams, the thing we kind of talked about was, we have to let Terp get loose. And it's a lot easier than just saying, hey, Terp, go do it. You got to sustain blocks and do things like that. And that goes back to my message to them about fundamentals.
All right. I felt like those were spot on from Shadi. Like in terms of awareness, in terms of acknowledging things that are true and not just some coach speak to satisfy the media. Like it felt like those were things that he had really thought about the day after the games. Like, yeah, celebrate the win. It was a great win. He even said in that same press conference, he said, yeah, we played great defense yesterday, which is true. But multiple things can be true. And when it comes to the game of football, typically multiple things are true. And in this case, the things that are true are that, yes, they played great defense on Sunday. Absolutely. They even played great offense. But everything that he said in terms of improvement was true. So kind of like I talked about the context of the game, he, in some ways, said something that I feel like complements what some of us are saying about the context of the game. Because he said, when you get teams in the red zone, you got to limit them to field goals. And that is true. Imagine if it was a team that was a little bit more put together, didn't have so many players out, that responded a little bit better to what the defense was giving them. Like, you don't want to give them that many opportunities to score. So, yeah, they do need to be a little bit better at making those stops in the red zone. 100% true. Absolutely. What he said about special teams. You've got Turpin back there who's got the potential to really go off. Cowboys fans who've been watching for a couple of years, we've seen it. We know what he can do. But now it's a matter of, okay, we need to get special teams on board with that and make sure that they're doing the things that they need to do so that that can happen. Once again, it's a team sport. I feel like all season and all these interviews and press conferences, we keep hearing these guys talk about doing their 111, which is basically like, hey, out of the 11 guys who are on the field at any given time, what is my job as a player? And so, like, there haven't been a lot of complaints about special teams, I think, because there are other bigger issues to focus on. But it's definitely something that can be looked at and that could really help the team. Because when it comes down to some of these games that will be a little bit closer, most games in the NFL are decided by 3 points or less, at least one possession or less, right? So you can expect for there to be some close games where something like where you end up after a kickoff or after a punt return, that matters. Those few extra yards that somebody like Cavante Turpin can get if guys are actually holding their block, that matters. It makes a difference. And Shadi is saying, yo, I don't want to wait till week 12 to start addressing this. We need to address this now. Valid. And also what he was saying about Dak's pass protection. I think that might improve a little bit once BB comes back. It'll also improve a little bit over time. They've had some changes on offense in general, just with CD leaving, CD coming back. They've got the addition of Jadon Blue. That could be making a difference in how certain things happen with timing and communication, so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot to look at there. But yeah, I just really respected Shadi for saying those things and acknowledging like, yo, this was a good win, but like we're not there yet, right? Even if you look at it from the perspective of like, okay, they say that defense wins championships, but it's not like any defense will win championships. Like if you really want to complete that phrase, the right way to say it would be properly executed defense is what it takes to win championships, right? And so at the end of the day, like I keep saying, this team is going to be judged on whether or not they make it to the playoffs and if they make a deep playoff run. So they need to have the kind of defense and the kinds of guys in the trenches on both sides, honestly, that can make that happen. So yes, what we saw on Sunday was a great step forward. But are they ready to make a great playoff run? No, they're not there yet. They took a step forward, but they still have several steps forward that they need to take in order for anyone, I think, to look at them and be like, yeah, they're going to get the team where they need to go. So I just like that they're acknowledging that. And even in just listening to some of the things that the players have said, it sounds like they've really got their heads on straight when it comes to that as well. It sounds like they did some really smart things in terms of player-only meetings leading up to the game. So this isn't me judging anybody or saying like, oh, they shouldn't rest on their laurels. They don't need me to tell them that. This is a fan talking to other fans and just acknowledging some of the things that we want to look for, this week, the week after, so on and so forth. But yeah, this has been a really interesting season. I'm sure this has been a trying season for everybody. And as somebody who loves following stories and narratives and development arcs, I love it. I love it. But that being said, that brings me to a segment that I like to call As It Is in Sports, So It Is in Life. And that's where I take a situation that has happened in the sports world and I talk about how it applies to life. And I feel like the situation that we're seeing with the Cowboys defense is a really good example of something that we can take from sports and apply it to real life and something that most of us can experience or have experienced, I should say. So Schottenheimer said something else in that press conference. At one point, he said, the world didn't end after the loss to Carolina. And I feel like that's really significant because after situations like that, when you lose or fail in a way that that could be considered that can make you question your identity. Was I ever as good as I thought I was? You know, the type of loss, the type of failure, the type of mess up that has people you don't even know talking about you for day after day after day for an entire week, right? And I don't know if all of us have experienced failure or loss on that magnitude. Some of us have, some of us haven't. But either way, you've experienced something that's really big that felt like it was big enough to derail you from what you felt like was your biggest goal, your biggest dream, or at least made you question your identity and everything that you had been doing up until that point. But look at where they are a week later. And not because it just happened, not because, that's just the way the chips fell. Like I said, it wasn't even just about the numbers. You look at the film and the formations look different. You look at the player assignments, their assignments were different. The way that they were playing, the assignments, what they were executing, it was all different. They made a lot of changes in a very short amount of time. And they didn't have to do that. They could have spread it out. They could have been conservative as hell. They could have been like, well, we don't want to make these changes with the linebacker rotation and make the changes to the defensive line and make the changes to the coverage all at the same time. That's just a lot at once. Oh no, like this week we'll just change the formations. Or this week we'll just move Maris to this spot over here and we'll see how that goes. They could have done that. They could have said, you know what, Shotty, don't come to the defensive meeting. Let us try this out on our own one more time without your input. They could have done that. They could have done any number of things that wouldn't have been as effective and might not have worked. But instead, what did we hear? We heard Shoddy was in the defensive meetings. We heard Kenneth Murray was leading player-only meetings, and that they were, looking at everything from communication to understanding assignments to talking, like just basically trying to immerse themselves in what they would experience real time. We saw them on the field. They had different formations. They had different assignments. They played with a different level of intensity. You know what I'm saying? They changed, instead of changing as little as they could to play it safe, they changed as much as they could. And they literally went in 1 week from people talking about them um like they were the worst thing in the world to people being like, oh my God, we didn't know that they had it in them. And JV, to answer your question, Shotty is not the DC. Eberflus is the DC, but Shotty's a head coach. So like it's incumbent upon him to take that step if he feels like it's beneficial, if he feels like it's necessary and says, you know what? As an offensive minded coach, I'm going to go to these defensive meetings. And what he said in his press conference was that he talked to them about how he would attack them if he were an offensive coordinator watching film on them. He said that he talked to them about what he would do and what he saw and how he would exploit what he perceived to be their weaknesses. And I feel like that's an important conversation to have. And that's something else that can be learned from this conversation. Like, how well do we take feedback? And feedback can be hard. Like, trust me, I know. Like when egos start coming into play, or sometimes people hit on something that triggers you, or sometimes people are just addressing that something that they don't realize how hard it is for you. They don't realize, like, it might be something that you've already been struggling with for so long. And it's just like, dang it, I really didn't want this to be the thing that messed me up. I really didn't want this to be the thing that people noticed about me out of all things. And so sometimes it takes a level of like humbling yourself, and it might take time. Not all of us are like the Cowboys defense where we can make that many changes in a week. But what we should consider is our capacity to make change. And it might hurt. It might mean pushing our ego to the side. It might mean approaching a situation with some humility. But can you get yourself to make those changes? Can you actually self-scout yourself in your own life and be like, you know what? I know I can do better. All I need to do is X, Y, and Z. And yes, it might be hard, but it's worth it. So I'm going to do whatever is necessary even if it means looking completely different to everybody who knows me, even if they don't recognize me, I'm gonna do whatever is necessary to make these changes happen so that I can be successful next time I have a stab at this thing. Anyway, we're about to be out. This has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports on NTX Radio. I'm your host, Jazz Monet. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn those notifications on. Luckily, we didn't have a hard out today. But thanks for everybody who's active in the chat. If you joined at the end, go ahead and hit that replay button and watch it again for me, okay? All right. I'll see y'all next week and possibly Thursday night. But until then, I'm Jazz Monet, and I'm out.